Hey guys, today we're going to look at a couple of different looping options. The Boss RC300 and the DigiTech JamMan series with the JamSync capabilities. We're going to look at both looping options individually, go over some pros and cons, some key features of both. Then we'll compare and contrast the two and go over ultimately what I think is the best route to go. Ultimately, these are my opinions on everything, so it's going to work around what I use loopers for, the utility that I'm looking to do with my live performances. So I'm definitely very interested to get any feedback from you guys and maybe go over some things that I might have missed. Anyways, let's get started with the Boss RC300. Before we get started, to go over a little bit of background of what I do, I've been a gigging musician at live restaurants and private parties for years now. I started off as a very basic looper using a one-pad looper, and then over the years just graduated up and up to the point where looping has become a large part of my whole shtick and my act of what I do, which led me to the Boss RC300, which I've been using for years now. And there are definite features that I think are fantastic about this pedal. One of which is that it's extremely user-friendly. It's basically 3 loopers in one. You've got record, overdub, and a quick stop, second looper, quick stop, third looper, quick stop. And one of the great features about this pedal is it's extremely customizable, first off, but I don't use it. I tend not to use a lot of the bells and whistles that come along with this pedal, but you can customize the global settings for it. I just tend to leave things standard. So the standard out of the box looping features that this has is whichever one of these pads or loop sections that you hit first, that becomes the master, and then the other 2 loopers are automatically the slave to that. And it'll stay within the same measure or length of time that the master has recorded. And I really like that feature, but you can customize that and have individual lengths set for each loop section. Also, when you're done hitting record and you're closing out the loop, it automatically goes into overdub mode. And I've just gotten used to this. Some people don't like it, some people are fans of it. I'm a fan of it because it helps close out the sound of the loop better. I've noticed that if you just close out the loop and don't have that overdub feature, the start of the loop and the beginning of the loop can sound a little clunky. So when I'm strumming away on my guitar, just having that overdub feature, like whatever, if you're doing some kind of rake with a guitar chord, it'll kind of blend that more seamlessly. Also, this pedal has a quantizing feature in it, which is extremely helpful. Now, obviously you can't be way off time, otherwise your loop section is gonna sound all garbled and muddy. But if you're just a little bit off, it'll correct for that. And overall, the looping sections, when you close out a loop, the entire loop playback sounds very seamless, and I've been a huge fan of it. One of the things that the Boss RC300 offers as well is just a ton of different effects that you can use. I'm not a huge fan of that. I don't use the effects. As you can see, I've got all the effects that I need on board, and if you guys like, I can go over these different effects with you in a separate video. But so I tend not to use the different effects at all. But one thing I do use quite consistently is the all start and the all stop button. What this does basically is if you have any loop running, it could be 1, 2, or 3 running. If you hit this, it'll stop all of them, and if you hit it again, it'll start up all of them. And I've noticed for my shows that I rely heavily on that because it creates this fantastic dynamic of just having those sharp rests that really just create a higher energy in the songs, and the audiences really just appreciate the novelty of that. Another great feature about this is that whichever one you start as the master, that's fine. It doesn't really make a difference. And then if you are recording with each separate looper, you can stop them independently and you can play them independently too. So if you have one as the master, essentially throughout the song you can have this stopped and you can just decide to have 2 and 3 playing, and then or just have 3 playing, or just have 2 playing. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that whichever one you create as your master, the loop length is going to be determined by the master for the other slave loopers. But again, you can change that in the global settings. Everything else, there's tons of different features in the back, as you can kind of see back here. They have MIDI connections, they have stereo ins and outs, microphone input to where you can loop your vocals. I tend not to use any of that stuff. I do all my percussive work with beating up my guitar rather than beatboxing, so that works pretty well for me. I have been using the RC300 for years now, and I just kind of felt like it was time to up my game a little bit, try to see if there's more options out there, because 3 loopers synced together is fantastic, and I love that, and I get the majority of the song sounds that I need by utilizing these 3. But there are some tracks that I do which it would just be nice to have a 4th looping option. So that's what got me looking into different looping options, and I came across the JamMan Solo XT and the JamMan Express XT, which is fantastic because it offers a loop sync option. Essentially, with an 1/8" TRS, you can connect each individual looper and create a big loop station as you want, as big of a loop station as you want. So I wanted to try to experiment using 4 because I just wanted to have one more, right? And I just wanted to see how well suited that was. So let's move on to the JamMan Solo. Okay, so what you see here is the JamMan series XT, which is synced up to essentially give myself a 4-channel loop station. And the main thing that I thought that was going to be most appealing about this option is the space on my board. Space for any gear junkie is kind of a big value. You only have so much real estate to play with on your pedal board, so you really want to make the best use of your space as possible. So that was the thing that I thought was really appealing about this option. Not only the unlimited looping potentials that you can have with this, but the saving on the space. Like I talked about with the RC300, I tend not to use the effects or anything like that. The only thing I want is just looping capabilities. So this seemed to offer that. I wanted to use this in conjunction with my Helix. I love this multi-effects pedal. I've been looking at different ways that I could expand on this and just to have the looping capabilities that I want while also using the Helix. So this seemed like the route to go. It's got the JamMan Solo XT here, and I wanted to make this the master looper, and the rest of these are slaves to this looper. You can get the manuals online. They'll go into bigger details of how to set it up and everything like that. So I won't get into those details. I'm mainly gearing this around just an overarching view and opinion of how well it works and a comparison between the two looping options. So I also included the FS3X, which is just an external foot controller attached to the JamMan Solo as the master. And this is just so I don't have to keep bending down and changing the different channels. So this goes up, this goes down, this held down clears the tracks. So that's great. So one of the biggest drawbacks that I found about this looping option is that your master has to begin the loops always. If these simply will not record if you hit it. You can arm them, and again they explain all of this stuff in the manuals. You can arm them, but they will not record. So you have to use the master in order to start the looping, and that is you know, it's not a huge deal, but like I talked about with the RC300, it's fantastic that it doesn't matter which track you're using. Any of those become the master, and then the other two will be slave to that. So it just gives you more options. The other thing that I found that was kind of off-putting about this is this has to record first, and then your separate tracks have to record on the second slave, the third slave, and the fourth slave. Again, not the biggest issue in the world, but for me, I like to do a lot of bouncing around. So if I wanted to do like kind of a chorus of guitars and record that over here, but then I wanted to add a bass guitar riff over here, it doesn't like that. It'll record on both. The bass guitar riff will also record over here, so that's something to be mindful of too. Secondly, something to be mindful of as well is that whatever the length of the loop is on the master doesn't correlate with the length of the loops on the slaves. So if you record whatever guitar riff you have over here, and say you wanted to create a percussive track over here, it's not automatically going to go back around when the guitar riff resolves itself. You have to do that manually. So that means you have to hit this just before this one loops back around. Otherwise, let's say you did a single measure over here, well, it'll go indefinitely. So if you're a little slow to the gun and you hit this just after this closes, well, this pedal is going to think that you want to record for 2 measures. So that's just something to keep in mind too. Now, you can avoid this by arming each of these before this one is started up. So by arming these, it'll be a flashing red light. By arming these, you begin recording over here, and when you close this out, these automatically go into record mode, but they're not actually recording anything. But it did signal to each of these pedals that they too are only to go 1 measure long, and they're going to be the length of whatever the loop time is over here on the master. So again, it's not the end of the world, but it does take a little bit more foresight on your part. Another thing that's something to keep in mind with DigiTech Express is that you do have to double tap in order to stop a loop. versus on the RC300 it was nice to just stop it. So that's slightly less tap dancing, and I'll go over what I think is the biggest drawback of the JamSync option is when you connect the FS3X, you have this button over here which will stop the JamMan solo on one press. So that creates a stop. The issue with this is that if you stop the master, it stops all the slaves. And that simply just isn't a great option for me for what I do. Sometimes I like to stop the master and still have the slaves going, because oftentimes I'll do my percussive work on whatever the master is, and just as a dynamics play, I like to have the chorus of guitars kind of playing in the background, and it just creates this melodic ambient sound before I can drop the beat and throw back in the percussion. So you simply just cannot do that. The way that I found to work around that is basically I create a metronome out of this one, and then once I've got that metronome and I've got all of these set to the time signature that I want, which is whatever this metronome is set to, I use this as my 3-channel looper. So essentially, I've just, it eliminated that prospect for me of getting the 4-channel looper, and now I'm working with a 3-channel looper again, which is what I wanted to expand on with the RC300. Now obviously, I could just get another express pedal and add that on there, and now I have the 4-channel looper. But like I said, it's a lot of tap dancing. It's kind of a pain that I'd have to use whatever the master is, is the metronome, but that's the only way that I've found that I can work around being able to stop whatever I treat as my master looper in this series. Because again, I'd want to be able to say stop this one but have these other two going. You just simply cannot do that with this. If you stop this, they all stop. And in order to start them all at the same time, you'd have to literally press all 3 of these to arm them, and then once you press this, it will create as an all-start option, which again is not terrible, but it does take a little bit of planning and foresight on your end to know what you're going to want to do at that point, versus the RC300 just had the single button with the all-start option. This is not necessarily a bad option for the JamMan XT series, because by arming them, you can be selective about which ones you want to start in the all-start option. So say you had some kind of guitar lead that just doesn't, you want it to be sporadic throughout the song, but you didn't want it to come in at the start of this hitting of the chorus. Well, you can just arm these two and then hit that, and you don't even have to worry about that. Versus with the RC300, you're just gonna have to be a little quick on your feet and hit that all start and then quickly zip over and stop whatever guitar lead that you might have looping, as a for instance. Okay, that's basically all I have for you. I didn't want to go into all the nitty-gritty details of both looping options, just a couple of key features and go over basically what I like to use it for and the pros and cons of both options. So at the end of the day, I still like the Boss RC300. I find it to be more user-friendly. There's less tap dancing, and I really appreciate that, because I do a lot of complex looping in my live shows, and I don't want to have to be concentrating on arming pedals or doing looping in a certain sequence as to avoid unwanted overdubs on a unnecessary channel. But I'm definitely very interested to hear your guys' input on that. See if I'm missing something or if there's different routes to go. But the Jam series is great if you don't mind having the foresight and planning ahead of doing things in sequence. And it's also great that you have unlimited potential for looping and the different channels. It saves on the space, that's great. But yeah, ultimately I gotta go with the RC300. I know there is an option to sync two RC300s together, create a master-slave situation out of there. But as you can see, I'm simply out of real estate and you know, short of doing another pedal board configuration. I don't know if I'm just ready to go down that route. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions, and if you like this video, please subscribe and I'll try to keep more videos like this coming.